This recording of Thomas A. Edison's original Mary Had a Little Lamb was made on the 50th anniversary of the invention of the phonograph. The ceremonies were filmed, and it was from that movie that this version was transcribed. The original recording was made by Edison on tinfoil in 1877.
The first words I spoke in the original phonograph, a little piece of practical poetry. Mary had a little lamb, its fleece was white as snow, and everywhere that Mary went, the lamb was sure to go.
One idea for the new phonograph of 1890 was to design a small hand-crank device that could be installed in a doll's body. Special records in the form of wax rings were made containing nursery rhymes and chatter. The dolls proved to be too delicate for regular use, and production was stopped after only a few months. Here is an especially good example of an 1890 Edison talking doll. In 1890, the wax cylinder phonograph that could permanently record the human voice was only a recently invented marvel. Some of the first Edison phonographs of this kind were demonstrated and sold in England. Here is the voice of the famous American showman, P.T. Barnum, addressing the people of England via the new Edison phonograph in 1890.
Edison House, London. This 17th of February, 1890, I wish to give my parting thanks to the British public and to assure them that I shall ever gratefully cherish most pleasant memories of their kindness and hospitality, even higher than the pecuniary success with which they have crowned my efforts to please them. I thus address the world through the medium of the latest wonderful invention, Edison's phonograph, so that my voice, like my great show, will reach future generations and be heard centuries after I have joined the great and, as I believe, happy majority. P.T. Barnum.
William Jennings Bryan was one of the last century's great political orators, whose presidential candidacies of the 1890s were marked by many famous speeches. The Edison Phonograph Company released several of Bryan's speeches on wax cylinders. Here he speaks to the issue of the nationalization of the railroads.
The Railroad Question by William Jennings Bryan, Edison Records. The right of the government to regulate the railroads has been established in both state and federal courts. The railroad is a quasi-public corporation. As such, it exercises the sovereign right of eminent domain, and it cannot escape from this public character. What we need is first to ascertain the value of the railroads, measured by the cost of reproduction, and second, to prevent for the future issues of fictitious capital and watered stock. When we have put railroad business upon an honest basis, we can proceed with rate reductions without, however, preventing a fair and just return upon the capital invested. Just now there is considerable discussion as to the relative sphere of the nation and the state, and some have taken the position that railroads should be given national incorporation. The Democratic position, however, is that national remedies should be added to state remedies and not substituted for them. The states should not be deprived of the power which they now have to protect their people against railroad abuses. Congress does not need any additional power. It has more power now than it has exercised, and is by the Constitution given full control over interstate commerce. It is not necessary that Congress shall control commerce within a state in order to effectively regulate interstate commerce. The present demand for national incorporation is not in the interest of the public, but in the interest of the railroads. But the people, Republicans and Democrats, will refuse to surrender any of the power now lodged in the states. This is not a revival of the doctrine of secession, as some railroad magnates have tried to make it appear. The question is not whether a state has the right to secede, but whether a state remaining in the Union shall be permitted to exercise the power vested in it by the Constitution for the protection of the rights of the people of the state.
The marching band sound of John Phillip Sousa was an American classic. On this Edison wax cylinder, the Sousa band performs the Yankee Shuffle, which ends with several recognizable American melodies. Sophie Tucker was a well-known songstress in the early years of this century. On this Edison wax cylinder of 1906, she belts out a tune called That Lovin' Rag. You'll notice several times that her strong voice was too much for the simple recording techniques, causing distortion in the recording.
The loving rag fills you with joy and joyful jag. It makes you glad, your heart is not sad. The loving rag. Your honey gown close to your breast, oh, you dance the rag. You love the bill, say you never wanna stop that loving rag. Oh, Lordy, 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 hear that tune. I'll forget my home and mother mighty soon. Keep right on the rag, you Lord, step on me. I tell you, babe, a home ain't nothing like this. Put your arms around me, we glide along. I feel myself a-slipping, I mean no wrong. So close your eyes, my babe, we dance till morn. That doggone loving rag. Oh, you hear that music softly play, Sam? I could dance all night and day. The loving rag, the bomber said, come on, get out of my way. I want a brass band playing for me, no Gilmore's or Sousa's orchestra. Dory loving article of harmony. Here's the loving rag. Oh, Lord. Babe. The loving rag, the bomber said, come on, get out of my way. I want a brass band playing for me, no Gilmore's or Sousa's orchestra. Dory loving article of harmony. Here's a loving rag.
Surprisingly, Edison, the inventor of the phonograph, rarely allowed his own voice to be recorded. What follows is Edison giving a speech before a convention of electrical manufacturers at Madison Square Garden in New York City in 1908.
Ladies and gentlemen, those of us who began our labors at the operator's key 50 years ago have been permitted to see and assist in the whole modern industrial development of electricity. Since the remarkable experiments of Morse in 1844 and the unsuccessful efforts of Field in 1858, there have come with incredible rapidity one electrical art after another, so that in practically every respect civilization has been revolutionized. It is still too early to stand outside these events and pronounce final judgment on their lasting value, but we may surely entertain the belief that the last half of the 19th century was as distinct in its electrical inventions and the results as the first half was in relation to steam. The lesson of the Jubilee of the Atlantic Cable of 1858 is one of encouragement to all who would add to the resources of our race and extend our control over the forces of nature. Never was failure more complete, never was higher courage shown, never was triumph more brilliant than that which since 1866 has kept the old world moored alongside the new by pulsating cables of steel and copper, the family ties of the civilized world. When I look around at the resources of the electrical field today, as shown in this exhibition, I feel that I would be glad to begin again my work as an electrician and inventor, and we veterans can only urge upon our successors, the younger followers of Franklin and of Kelvin, to realize the measure of their opportunities and to rise to the heights of their responsibilities in this day of electricity.
Popular tunes and singers sell more records. This is true now, and it was true 70 years ago. The Edison Company had many artists under contract to record then-current or old-time favorites. Billy Murray recorded many cylinders and discs for Edison, both solo and in duets with popular female artists.
With his sweetheart came from County Cork, and bent upon a holiday they landed in New York. They strolled around to see the sights, alas, 'tis sad to say. Poor Kelly lost his little girl upon the Great White Way. She walked uptown from Herald Square to 42nd Street. The traffic stopped as she cried to the copper on the beat. Has anybody here seen Kelly? K-E-double-L-Y. Has anybody here seen Kelly? You would know him by his smile. Sure, his hair is red, his eyes are blue, and he's Irish through and through. Has anybody here seen Kelly? Kelly from the Emerald Isle. Has anybody here seen Kelly? K-E-double-L-Y. Has anybody here seen Kelly? You would know him by his smile. Sure, his hair is red, his eyes are blue, and he's Irish through and through. Has anybody here seen Kelly? Kelly from the Emerald Isle.
Fifth Avenue, a band began to play. 10,000 men were marching, 'twas on St. Patrick's Day. The wearing of the green rang out upon the morning air. 'Twas Kelly's favorite song, so Mary said, I'll find him there. She jumped up in the grandstand in hopes her might she'd see 500 Kellys left the ranks in answer to her plea. Has anybody here seen Kelly? K-E-double-L-Y. Has anybody here seen Kelly? Have you seen him passing by? Sure, his hair is red, his eyes are blue, and he's Irish through and through. Has anybody here seen Kelly? Kelly with the green necktie. All day long she roamed around the town in search of Mike. She passed an iron foundry where the molders were on strike. A crowd of men were fighting, there was murder in the air. Said Mary, where the fighting's good, you'll find a Kelly there. A burly chap struck right and left, he downed most every man. Said Mary, that big fella there can fight like Kelly can. Has anybody here seen Kelly? K-E-double-L-Y. Has anybody here seen Kelly? Have you seen him passing by? Sure, his hair is red, his eyes are blue. He was pickled through and through. Has anybody here seen Kelly? Kelly with a green necktie. Has anybody here seen Kelly? Kelly. K-E-double-L-Y. Has anybody here seen Kelly?
Kelly?
Have you seen him passing by? Sure, his hair is red, his eyes are pink. He is a German, I don't think. Has anybody here seen Kelly? Kelly! Get the green necktie!
Edison's favorite song was I'll Take You Home Again, Kathleen, performed here by Will Oakland. It's a song some people like, some do not. Certainly not an overwhelming favorite. Edison's taste in music has been blamed for the fact that Edison record sales often lagged behind his competitors. This version was recorded on wax cylinder about 1910.
I'll take you home again, Kathleen, across the ocean wild and wide, to where your heart has ever been, since first you were my bonny bride. Your voice is sad whene'er you speak, and tears bedim your loving eyes. Oh, I will take you back, Kathleen, to where your heart will feel no pain. And when the fields are fresh and green, I'll take you to your home again. I know you love me, Kathleen dear. Your heart was ever fond and true. I always feel when you are near that life holds nothing dear but you. The smile that once you gave to me, I scarcely ever see them now. Though many, many times I see a darkening shadow on your brow. Oh, I will take you back, Kathleen, to where your heart will feel no pain, and when the fields are fresh and green, I'll take you to your home again.
Here is another popular recording from that era, the duo of Collins and Harlan performing Row, Row, Row on a 1913 Edison Blue Amberol cylinder.
Young Johnny Jones, he had a cute little boat, and all the girlies he would take for a float. He had girlies on the shore, sweet little peaches by the score. But Johnny was a Weisenheimer, you know. His steady girl was slow, and every Sunday afternoon he'd jump in his boat and they would spoon, and then he'd row, row, row. Way up the river he would row, row, row. A hug he'd give her, then he'd kiss her now and then. She would tell him when. He'd fool around, and then they'd kiss again, and then he'd row, row, row. A little further he would row, oh, 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 oh. Then he'd drop both his oars, take a few more encores, and then he'd row, row, row. Right in his boat he had a cute little seat, and every kiss he stole from Flo was so sweet. And he knew just how to row. He was a rowing Romeo. He knew an island where the trees were so grand. He knew just where to land. Them tales of love he'd tell to flow until it was time for them to go. And then he'd row, row, row. Way up the river he would row, row, row. A hug he'd give her, then he'd kiss her now and then. She would tell him when. He'd fool around, and then they'd kiss again, and then he'd row, row, row. A little further he would row, oh, 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 oh. Then he'd drop both his oars, take a few more encores, and then He'd drop both his oars, take a few more encores, and then he'd row, row, row.
Recreated speeches, explanatory talks, and comic sketches were also released as Edison records, but their popularity was limited. Harry E. Humphrey recorded many such recitation records, including this version of Lincoln's Gettysburg Address on an Edison celluloid cylinder of 1913.
"47 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation or any nation so conceived and so dedicated can long endure. We are met on a great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who here gave their lives, that that nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. But in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here, have consecrated it far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will little note nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for us, the living, rather to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion, that we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth.
In 1912, Edison developed a method for molding celluloid plastic cylinder records. A blue dye was added to the celluloid for eye appeal and to distinguish them from the earlier black wax amberol 4-minute records. However, the plaster of Paris core used to support the thin celluloid shell tended to warp the records, which caused a low-frequency rumbling sound. Edison had a broad sense of humor throughout his life. Here he is telling a joke called The Liver Story, recorded privately at the Edison Company at about the time the blue amberol celluloid cylinders were first introduced.
Say, Walter Miller, did you ever hear this story of this California story? About 25 years ago, a man from Boston who was a furniture dealer had a very bad case of liver complaint. So he went to California and rigged out a team and started down the San Joaquin Valley with the idea of testing all the mineral springs that were in that valley so that it might relieve him of the terrible pains he had from his liver complaint. Well, he traveled down the valley for the whole summer and he had no relief. But towards the end of the valley, he came to a spring and it immediately relieved him of his pain. Well, he was a very wealthy man, so he started a sanitarium and sent the searchers all over the world, and by and by there were people who came from all parts of the world and stayed at the sanitarium, and their liver complaint was cured and they were relieved of their pain. Well, about 20 years afterwards, the man died. And at the coroner's inquest, they had to take his liver out and kill it with a club.
Although we can't be absolutely certain, A cylinder record in the Edison collection is marked Piano Solo, Edison, 1915. As you can tell from even this poor recording, the great inventor was not much of a piano player. We can't even blame this on hearing loss, however, for he auditioned countless recording artists even into the 1920s. Theodore Roosevelt was a great American president, and several Edison cylinders containing his speeches were released. The optimism of the ideas of social reform of the early 20th century are evident in this speech called Social and Industrial Justice, which was released on blue amberol cylinder in 1919.
Our prime concern is that in dealing with the fundamental law of the land, in assuming finally to interpret it and therefore finally to make it, the acts of the courts should be subject to and not above the final control of the people as a whole. I deny that the American people have surrendered to any set of men, no matter what their position or their character, the final right to determine those fundamental questions upon which free self-government ultimately depends. The people themselves must be the ultimate makers of their own constitution. And where their agents differ in their interpretations of the Constitution, the people themselves should be given the chance, after full and deliberate judgment, authoritatively to settle what interpretation it is that their representatives shall thereafter adopt as binding. We do not question the general honesty of the courts, but in applying to present-day social conditions the general prohibitions that were intended originally as safeguards to the citizen against the arbitrary power of government in the hands of caste and privilege, these prohibitions have been turned by the courts from safeguards against political and social privilege into barriers against political and social justice and advancement. Our purpose is not to impugn the courts, but to emancipate them from a position where they stand in the way of social justice, and to emancipate the people in an orderly way from the iniquity of enforced submission to a doctrine which would turn constitutional provisions which were intended to favor social justice and advancement into prohibitions against such justice and advancement. In the last 20 years, an increasing percentage of our people have come to depend on industry for their livelihood, so that today the wage workers in industry rank in importance side by side with the tillers of the soil. As a people, we cannot afford to let any group of citizens or any individual citizen live or labor under conditions which are injurious to the common welfare. Industry, therefore, must submit to such public regulation as will make it a means of life and health, not of death or inefficiency. We must protect the crushable elements at the base of our present industrial structure. We stand for a living wage. Wages are subnormal if they fail to provide a living for those who devote their time and energy to industrial occupations. The monetary equivalent of a living wage varies according to local conditions, but must include enough to secure the elements of a normal standard of living. A standard high enough to make morality possible, to provide for education and recreation, to care for immature members of the family, to maintain the family during periods of sickness, and to permit of reasonable saving for old age. Hours are excessive if they fail to afford the worker sufficient time to recuperate and return to his work thoroughly refreshed. We hold the night work of labor and women, that the night labor of women and children is abnormal and should be prohibited. We hold that the employment of women over 48 hours per week is abnormal and should be prohibited. We hold that the 7-day working week is abnormal, and we hold that 1 day of rest in 7 should be provided by law. We hold that the continuous industries operating 24 hours out of 24 are abnormal, where because of public necessity or for technical reasons, such as molten metal, the 24 hours must be divided into 2 shifts of 12 hours or 3 shifts of 8. They should, by law, be divided into 3 of 8.
The diamond disc record, introduced by Edison in 1913, was his first attempt at the disc format. Using a hard plastic-like material for the record and a diamond point for the playing needle, hence the name, the Edison disc offered high-quality reproduction and long life. At 80 RPM and with vertical modulation, however, the Edison discs were not playable on competitors' machines, and so a complete line of diamond disc phonographs had to be introduced. This post-war message from Edison praising the efforts of the Allied troops was recorded on an Edison diamond disc in 1919. Edison also had aided the war efforts and was a member of the Naval Consulting Board, which sought new technological weapons and defenses during World War I.
This is Edison speaking. Our boys made good in France. The word American has a new meaning in Europe. Our soldiers have made it mean courage, generosity, self-restraint, and modesty. We are proud of the North Americans who risked their lives for the liberty of the world. But we must not forget, and we must not permit demagogues to belittle the part played by our gallant allies. Their casualty lists tell the story. However proud we may be of our own achievements, let us remember always that the war could not have been won if the Belgians, the British, the French, and the Italians had not fought like bulldogs in the face of overwhelming odds. The Great War will live vividly in the minds of Americans for the next 100 years. I hope that when we do reverence to the memory of our brave boys who fell in France, we shall not forget that their brothers in arms who wore the uniform of our allies. I believe that the national airs of France, Great Britain, Italy, and Belgium should for all time to come be as familiar to us as our own Star-Spangled Banner.
Released on Edison Diamond Disc in 1928 was the snappy foxtrot I Want to Be Loved by You from the Broadway show Good Boy. The Green Brothers Novelty Band recorded several sides on the Edison label during the late 1920s. Edison's last effort in sound recording came late in the 1920s with the release of standard format 78 RPM records. These records were made with electrical recording techniques and intended for phonographs using either electrical or acoustical playback. These recordings were discontinued in October of 1929, the month of the stock market crash, and marked the end of the Edison Company's phonograph division. Very few of these Edison electrical recordings were made, and even fewer were ever distributed and sold. This recognizable tune is a good example of these late Edison records.
To the window, by the window, that is where I'll be. Come tiptoe through the tulips with me. Tiptoe from your pillow to the shadow of a willow tree, and tiptoe through the tulips with me. Knee-deep in flowers we'll stray, we'll keep the showers away. And if I kiss you in the garden, in the moonlight, will you pardon me? Come tiptoe through the tulips with me.